One thing I do not enjoy doing is consistently sounding the alarm like some conspiracy theorist nut. I know that's the label that many people that are asleep like to place on videos like this. The world is asleep, walking like zombies. But the worst part is, the zombies actually have the audacity to come at you like pit bulls when you're just reporting the news and narratives that the world is speaking on. It's not some unfounded conspiracy theory. It's unfortunate that people only listen when the mainstream media starts speaking collectively on an issue. They rely on the media and the mainstream so heavily, and it's really sad because anytime you ever have a real conversation with the sheeple and ask them, when was any time the media and mainstream prepared you for anything important before it happened? No one can ever give you an answer. An economic collapse happens, they say, no one could ever have predicted this. War happens, they say, it was a surprise attack. Pandemic happens, no one had a clue. Blah, blah, blah. The same stories and explanations over and over. But yet, this is what the masses trust to guide them and keep them informed. But this video isn't about the media. Events have been transpiring over the past few weeks that everyone should have in their radar, regardless if you understand the full scope to the agendas happening, or if you're completely asleep to what is going on in the world. Everyone should be moving with caution and living with an expectation and level of preparedness for problems ahead. As I see events unfolding, I see that they are signaling the plane for landing, and their New World Order and Great Reset is coming in for its descent. At the very least, you who is watching should be mindful of the narratives that are shaping up and what could come from it. We are approaching something, and I want everyone watching to live in reality and live with the right expectations. Live your life, but make sure you are ready for the unexpected, which actually by now should be the expected. The world is gearing up for war and economic collapse, which will bring in their Great Reset. You need to be prepared for it. Let's talk about what is happening around the world. And you'll see, though they are clearly talking about it, the majority of the world are still distracted and not ready. I want to help change that as much as I can. Let's begin. Okay, so before we get into what is happening, let me give this disclaimer because it's important. When I report this news, I am not talking as if I actually believe that these conflicts are real. What I mean is that I'm not saying that I believe that there's really beef between these countries. Maybe there is, more likely there isn't. I don't know, nor do I really care, to be honest. When I'm speaking of all of this, I'm speaking of the narratives. You see, I look at this world as scripted. The events happen in a way to move people into a certain agenda already planned. The narrative is about getting people to move the way they want them to move, as well as how they will write things off in the history books. So as I report these things, this is not about falling into the trap of being led into believing their narratives, but it's more of understanding the script and trying to see where the story is leading. If you understand agendas as well as Bible prophecy, you confidently know a few things. 1, there will be a world government where laws are no longer about individual nations, but the world as a whole. 2, there will be a world currency, so there is no more competition between nations in regards to their own money that they create in their own nation. With the world currency, a country cannot dominate another because of the power of their currency. And 3, there will be a false messiah that will come from this, that the world will look to. The world will no longer look to individual leaders from individual nations that are about politics and their nation's agendas, but they will look for one that will seem to be all about the benefit for all of humanity. Now, if you're asleep to this world, you probably are cheering these things on and anticipating all of this with hope. And what that simply means is that the Matrix has you. Come out of it. But if you are really awake to all of this, you understand how sinister all of those things really are and what it actually means for the world. Either way, no matter what, these things will be happening, and the only thing we don't know for sure is how we will get there. There are agendas and people creating narratives that will bring the masses into accepting those 3 goals and prophetic events. And so what those of us awake to the world try to do is 1, not be moved mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and physically by the events that lead us into these prophetic events. And 2, we sound the alarm so that others not fully awake can snap out of their delusion and not be led astray into their order out of chaos. The events that are happening are leading us straight into chaos that will eventually produce the order that has always been a part of their grand design. So what we must do is be ready for it. War and economic collapse are coming. The sooner you get your head around it and are prepared for it, the better chances you have when it comes. So let me just talk about what is happening in the world right now. The narrative in the world right now is that as this pandemic starts to wind down and the order that needs to be created starts to form, the narrative coming from the United States and the IMF is that we are about to really move into a strong economic recovery. They're basically saying as the world gets vaccinated and people start going back to their old way of life, we are going to see record growth because of how bad things were just a year ago. But the funny thing is that though our economic numbers were so down during the pandemic, you know what didn't stay down? Yes, the stock market. No, it continually rose to all-time highs, even as we were at high unemployment, the government passing around free stimulus money to everyone, and states and cities were still under shutdown orders. The stock market was still going at all-time highs. I mean, just now, the stock market just recently hit an all-time high. And I guess what the mainstream wants people to believe is that we still have room to keep going higher and higher as the economy is predicted to reopen. But what people should really get in their heads is that we are in a bubble and it will pop. They are keeping this bubble inflated for a reason, and they will only allow it to pop when it is ready for them to use for their agenda. I believe war will pop it, or we will go to war because of it popping. But everyone should understand what is at stake. I've said this and spoken about this many times in many different videos. It's not just about an economic collapse. An economic collapse can happen and then we rebuild after some time. This is not just about an economic collapse, but about an economic reset. And the reason why the narrative about things looking so good right now is important is because this will allow those not paying attention to feel war is justified when the problems arise. This economic reset is coming from a replacement of the dollar as the world's reserve currency. Earlier in this video, I said we know that a world currency is on the horizon. What that means simply is that the world will no longer use the United States dollar as the world standard for money, and the world will transition to something that is not about one particular country. And look, this is not some conspiracy theory either. They have been alluding for a long time about a global currency that transcends borders and nations. They'll have everything in the world valued by the same money. Now, I've said this to people for many years to prepare for this, and the majority have said the same thing. This dollar collapse will not happen in our lifetime. But these people were just not paying attention. And now, at the current times that we are in, we have a digital currency that has gained world attention and credibility. We have countries retreating from the United States dollar. And we have countries like China directly competing against the dollar, an action that we have seen bring countries in direct conflict with the United States before. We are seeing the last days of King Dollar. The United States dollar does not have much more time and power, and everyone should be paying attention to that. I mean, look what we have been doing to its value just since the pandemic. We have printed trillions of dollars and added continuous unpayable debt to the United States economic statements. And the rest of the world sees this and have been making moves against the dollar. We have been seeing countries and banks retreating from the dollar. Just look at this article from the Wall Street Journal. Central banks retreat from the United States dollar. Dollar shares of global reserves have decreased to lowest level since 1995. You see, they are giving us warnings in the mainstream without sounding the alarm. It's up to each individual to make up their own minds and make smart decisions. One thing I keep telling people to watch more than the stock market is the bond market. Watch the United States debt. The more people continue to loan the United States money, the more safe the economic situation is. The more that you see people selling our debt, the more you see a lack of confidence in our debt, and economic situation. Since the beginning of this year, we have been having an issue with our debt and interest rates. Now, don't confuse this. This is not talking about the rates that the Federal Reserve gives. That's still at basically zero. But this is from our treasuries. We have seen a spike in interest rate yields, which means that people are dumping our debt. The rates on the US 10-year Treasury is about 1.66%. But there are warnings about what happens if this continues to go higher. Look at this article. A professor from NYU just gave out a warning that US yields above 2% will bite amid excess risk. The professor, who earned the nickname Dr. Doom for his ominous prognostications about the economy and financial system, warned that a more Archegos-style meltdowns could be triggered. Roubini said one shock could come if 10-year U.S. Treasury yields climb higher than 2% this year. He also said United States sanctions may lead countries like China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea to diversify away from dollar assets. Investors must also grapple with other risks, including the return of inflation and the prospect of a hot war between the United States and China, Roubini said. They are giving out the warnings, people. Pay attention to what he just said about inflation, because you should be noticing that the cost of items right now are going up. Look at what's happening at the gas tank. Are you paying more for gas? This is inflation. The value of the dollar is decreasing. And notice how he also mentioned the hot war between the United States and China. Remember, I said war is coming. Before we get into it, though, let's keep talking about the money. You see, the media is glossing over this extremely important subject. They're talking about all this news that is really irrelevant to our lives, having us follow the George Floyd trial, walking us into whatever feelings they want us to have. But major events that would affect every one of our lives, they give it a few minutes, but not close to the attention that it should be getting. Listen to this report from CBS.
China has created its own form of digital currency. Known as the digital yuan, the currency will be owned by the central bank. This is the first major economy to create its own digital currency. The digital yuan isn't like Bitcoin, which is not backed by a government or central bank.
Now, mind you, China has been working on this and speaking on this for years. None of this is new to those paying attention, but it's now here in the media, who hypes the most smallest of things and gives us repetitive news in the most hypnotic ways to stress their points. They are only giving us bits and pieces and telling everyone not to worry, not a big deal. But China is threatening the United States dollar. That's a pretty big thing. Here's another article from the Wall Street Journal. China creates its own digital currency, a first for major economy. A cyber yuan stands to give Beijing power to track spending in real time, plus money that isn't linked to the dollar-dominated global financial system. Listen to some key points this article makes. 1,000 years ago, when money meant coins, China invented paper currency. Now, the Chinese government is minting cash digitally in a reimagination of money that could shake a pillar of American power. It might seem money is already virtual, as credit card and payment apps such as Apple Pay in the United States and WeChat in China eliminate the need for bills or coins. But those are just ways to move money electronically. China is turning legal tender itself into computer code. Beijing is also positioning the digital yuan for international use and designing it to be untethered to the global financial system, where the United States dollar has been king since World War II. Digitized money could reorder the fundamentals of finance, the way Amazon.com Inc. disrupted retailing and Uber Technologies Inc. rattled taxi systems. Josh Lipsky, a former International Monetary Fund staffer, now at the Atlantic Council think tank, said, "Anything that threatens the dollar is a national security issue. This threatens the dollar over the long term." You see, they know what is happening and coming. They are telling us, and because the masses are waiting for the media to make a bigger deal out of it, they think it's okay to ignore it. Look at this article from CNBC. China leaps into a central bank digital currency. but similar progress eludes the US. They allude to the same thing. Look, at the very least, China's lead in the central bank digital currency space somewhat breathes down the neck of the dollar when it comes to cross-border payments. The digital development also provides an insurance policy for China that it should run afoul of global regulations and find itself the subject of sanctions. It will still have a way to transact business. But the Fed is likely to continue taking its time despite questions over whether China's move threatens the US and the dollar's global standing. It's clear that they know what is upon us, but they either don't want the public prepared or alarmed, and you have to ask the question, why? I mean, people may want to find reasons to justify the lack of urgency that they're giving. I know a friend that loves to say, nothing new here, even though everything really is new. Maybe we want to say that China only has good intentions, and this isn't about contentions or conflicts. But listen to them.
PayPal co-founder Peter Thiel sounding an alarm on Bitcoin. Speaking at a Nixon Foundation event, Thiel said, quote, "I do wonder whether if at this point Bitcoin should also be thought of in part as a Chinese financial weapon against the U.S. It threatens fiat money, but it especially threatens the dollar."
Well, I think, the general premise here is that Bitcoin's ascendance does come at the expense of the dollar's role as the world reserve currency. So
what they are interested in is the technology behind Bitcoin, blockchain. You had earlier this week China coming out saying it's going to be launching its own digital yuan. That may be where the real threat is. China is moving quickly on this technology. U.S. has talked about a digital dollar, but there's been no action, and maybe for good reason. There needs to be very thoughtful and planned out. But I think that is where the real threat is. And if the Chinese get their massive population to use a digital yuan, that could lead to more usage of Bitcoin. And to Mike's point, that could eventually sort of take over the U.S. dollar.
All right, let's talk next about a driver shortage hitting Uber and Lyft.
Listen, did you see how she said all that and then he nicely just parlays into something else, like what they were talking about wasn't extremely significant?
That could eventually sort of take over the U.S. dollar.
All right, let's talk next about a driver shortage hitting Uber and Lyft.
That's how they do, though. But as you can see, they know what is happening and what is coming. The dollar has rivals, and it's being challenged, and that has tremendous consequences for all of us. I have made many videos speaking about the collapse of the dollar and the coming economic collapse, so I will not continue to drill this point. If you do not understand, please go back and watch the videos. I have an economic collapse playlist that has much needed info in there. But if you really can't recognize the risk, you really need to wake up, because it is right there in front of your face. Now here's the thing. If it was only about economics and the world tensions weren't high, maybe I could understand people putting their guard down. But not only are they creating conflict on an economic scale, which we haven't really seen since the dollar became the world reserve currency, but there is also military conflict brewing that seems imminent and right at our door. Before we discuss the military conflicts, you should understand that the move that China has done, making the digital yuan, this move is not just about competing with the United States dollar, but it is a military move as well that protects them from economic risk. One of the first and biggest tools the United States likes to use against a country are sanctions. Sanctions give Washington the ability to freeze individuals and institutions out of the global financial system by barring banks from doing transactions with them. Other countries like China have called this practice dollar weaponization. China going into the digital yuan is a military defensive move as well, and it also brings along allies that the United States has worked to shut out, like Russia, Iran, and North Korea. Going back to that Wall Street Journal article about China creating its digital currency, the article also said, the digital yuan could give those the United States seeks to penalize a way to exchange money without United States knowledge. Exchanges wouldn't need to use SWIFT, the messaging network that is used in money transfers between commercial banks, and that can be monitored by the United States government. The chance to weaken the power of American sanctions is central to Beijing's marketing of the digital yuan, and to its efforts to internationalize the yuan more generally. In a 2019 war game at Harvard University, veteran U.S. policymakers scrambled to craft a response to a nuclear missile development by North Korea, secretly funded with digital yuan. Because of the currency's power to undercut sanctions, the participants, including several who are now in the Biden administration, deemed it more threatening than the warhead. Nicholas Burns, a longtime American diplomat and favorite to be ambassador in Beijing, told the group, "The Chinese have created a problem for us by taking away our sanctions leverage." And there you have it. So what the news about China launching the digital currency is really about is not just about challenging the dollar, but the fact that China has developed a system that can block one of the United States' most powerful weapons. This is actually wartime movements that the masses are just ignorant of. But again, like I said, this is all for nothing if the world is at peace and there aren't really any threats. Since we are talking about China right now, let's first continue on with them. Like I've been showing, there are many threats brewing and growing that the media is just overlooking. They mention it, but are not giving it much thought. I mean, think about it. If China has made a new currency that challenged the dollar and the United States sanctions capabilities, and they are also threatening military moves that will drive the United States into conflict, you don't have to be Sherlock Holmes to see that there is very high potential for war on the horizon. This tension with China has been building for years, but it is now at a point where moves are happening weekly. Look.
New reports show that China could be flirting with the idea of seizing control of Taiwan. This as U.S. officials warn Xi Jinping is willing to take more and more risk to boost his legacy. Meanwhile, Taiwan reporting the largest incursion ever by the Chinese Air Force after 20 military aircraft entered Taiwan's air defense identification zone on Friday. Joining me right now is Fox News.
China stepped up a show of force around Taiwan on Wednesday, sending more fighter jets into the island's self-defense zone. Taiwan's foreign minister responded by warning it would fight to the end in case of war. The democratic self-governed island, which China claims as its own, has complained of escalating military activity by Beijing in recent months. On Monday, China said an aircraft carrier group was exercising around the island, while the U.S. Navy said it had conducted a, quote, routine transit of the Taiwan Strait on Wednesday. U.S. State Department spokesman Ned Price on Wednesday described Washington's commitment to Taiwan as, quote, rock solid. Washington is Taiwan's most important international backer and arms supplier, and it's been pushing Taipei to modernize its military and become a porcupine hard for China to attack. Taiwan's foreign minister Joseph Wu said Taiwan was determined to improve its military capabilities and spend more on defense, and would run war simulations later this month. China, which claims its Taiwan activities are aimed at protecting Chinese sovereignty, did not respond to requests for comment on Wu's remarks.
As you can see, the narrative is that there is clear conflict brewing over Taiwan. In an article by the Associated Press, the headline reads, U.S. military cites rising risk of Chinese move against Taiwan. The article says that the American military is warning that China is probably accelerating its timetable for capturing control of Taiwan, the island democracy that has been the chief source of tension between Washington and Beijing for decades, and is widely seen as the most likely trigger for a potentially catastrophic U.S.-China war. The worry about Taiwan comes as China wields new strength from years of military buildup. It has become more aggressive with Taiwan and more assertive in sovereignty disputes in the South China Sea. Beijing also has become more confrontational with Washington. Senior Chinese officials traded sharp and unusually public barbs with Secretary of State Anthony Blinken in talks in Alaska last month. A military move against Taiwan, however, will be a test of U.S. support for the island that Beijing views as a breakaway province. For the Biden administration, it could present the choice of abandoning a friendly, democratic entity or risk what could become an all-out war over a cause that is not on the radar of most Americans. The United States has long pledged to help Taiwan defend itself, but it has deliberately left unclear how far it will go in response to a Chinese attack. On Wednesday, Taiwanese Foreign Minister Joseph Wu said the military threat against his country is increasing. And while he said it was not yet particularly alarming, the Chinese military in the last couple of years has been conducting what he called real combat type exercises closer to the island. We are willing to defend ourselves. That's without any question, Wu told reporters. We will fight a war if we need to fight a war. And if we need to defend ourselves to the very last day, then we will defend ourselves to the very last day. They're talking war here. In an article from U.S. News and World Report, they give more detail. It says, China issues new threats to Taiwan. The island's military won't stand a chance. New provocative language from Beijing comes amid heightened tensions in the region and new fears from the U.S. military about China's willingness to invade the island nation. Beijing on Friday issued new threats against Taiwan at a time of near unprecedented tensions around the island nation, saying its military won't stand a chance if China chose to invade. The threat comes amid a series of provocative actions and warnings in recent days by the Chinese military, the People's Liberation Army, or PLA, including a series of air and naval incursions into territory that Taiwan claims as its own. Beijing considers Taiwan a renegade province of mainland China, not a sovereign nation. The PLA exercises are not only warnings, but also show real capabilities in pragmatically practicing reunifying the island if it comes to that, an unnamed told the Chinese state news service Global Times in a fiery article it published Friday morning. It added that the people of Taiwan are dashing into a war that they cannot win. Yeah, that's how they're carrying it. China has expressed particular outrage at a series of computerized war games that Taiwan is conducting this week to simulate its response to its potential Chinese invasion. The U.S., which increasingly backed Taiwan's autonomy in recent months amid the threat posed by Chinese perceived expansionism, has escalated its response in recent days, including Navy patrols by the USS John McCain in international waters known as Freedom of Navigation Operations, to contest Beijing's claims over regional waters. So yeah, China is playing chess with the United States, and war could be imminent with Taiwan, which would bring the United States in. But of course, this is not the only conflict brewing with the United States. The other adversary who is a major partner with China, which is Russia, is also on the move for a military conflict in Ukraine. Let's take a look and see what's happening there.
German Chancellor Angela Merkel has called on Russian President Vladimir Putin to pull back his forces from Russia's border with Ukraine. The White House says Russia now has more troops there than at any time since conflict broke out in eastern Ukraine in 2014. The buildup has fueled fears of new fighting, but Russia insists that it is the victim of Western provocations.
Russian state television offers a different way of looking at things. It reports that Ukraine and NATO pose a threat to Russia, and not the other way round. The narrative presents Ukrainian soldiers as the aggressors, and shows video footage of Moscow's response, Russian troops engaged in military exercises in Crimea. What to the West looks like saber-rattling is viewed differently by Russia. For Moscow, it's a necessary reinforcement of its defenses against the West. The majority of the Ukrainian military understand the fatal consequences of any actions that would lead to conflict. I hope they won't be provoked by politicians who in turn are being provoked by the West, especially the United States.
Yeah. Let's take a look at some news articles to get more details. The Wall Street Journal reports, Russia warns of full-scale war in eastern Ukraine, blames Kiev. The buildup of Russian troops on the border and escalating rhetoric threaten to derail efforts to reach a peaceful settlement. The article says, the recent deployment of Russian troops along Ukraine's border and Moscow's indication that it could intervene in the event of a full-scale war in eastern Ukraine are dimming hopes for a peaceful resolution of the conflict that has festered for 7 years and cost thousands of lives. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov told reporters on Friday that Russia had the right to move its forces across its territory at its discretion and was simply taking precautions given the dangerous explosive region at its borders with eastern Ukraine. Mr. Peskov warned that the situation on the contact line was extremely unstable and said the dynamics create the danger of a resumption of full-scale hostilities. Russian President Vladimir Putin accused Ukraine of resuming dangerous provocative actions in its eastern Donbass region in a call Friday with Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, according to a readout from the Kremlin. Dmitry Kozak, Deputy Chief of Staff of Russia's Presidential Executive Office, warned on Thursday that Moscow will be forced to defend its citizens living in eastern Ukraine in the event of an all-out war, and said this would be the beginning of the end for Ukraine. Playing with muscles in the form of military exercises and possible provocations along the border is a traditional Russian affair, Mr. Zelensky, who is the president of Ukraine, wrote on his Telegram messaging channel last week. It seeks to create an atmosphere of threat and, at the same time, of pressure during the ceasefire negotiations. Mr. Zelensky has argued that accelerating Ukraine's path to membership of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO, would help prevent deeper conflict with Russia. But Russian officials and pro-Kremlin analysts say NATO's involvement would raise the ante and diverge from diffusing the tensions. If the United States of America and NATO begin to support Ukraine and strike at the Donetsk and Luhansk People's Republic, Russia will certainly enter a military conflict, Mr. Sitkov, the military analyst, said. War is brewing. The Daily Star from the United Kingdom reported, Russia-Ukraine, days from war as Vladimir Putin puts 100,000 troops on border. The Russia-Ukraine crisis could be days from exploding into war, with the source saying UK commanders are on high alert and monitoring the situation with growing concern. The article says, the Russian-Ukraine crisis could be days from exploding into war, it is feared. UK senior commanders and Whitehall officials are on high alert and monitoring the situation with growing concern, a source told the Mirror. A source said, aggressive Russian troop movements towards the border have caused a great deal of concern within the Ministry of Defense. The situation is being monitored constantly. I would definitely describe this as a growing crisis. It is feared that within days, more than 95,000 assault troops, backed by tanks, armored vehicles, artillery, and even thermobaric rocket batteries, will be ready to invade. Tens of thousands of Ukrainian troops, including reservists, have been called up to the border, and U.S. advisors are believed to be in country, according to the sources. American intelligence assessments grade the threat of a major Russian-Ukraine flare-up as potential imminent crisis, as stated by the European Operations Center, EUCOM. More than 10 heavily armed Russian warships are now steaming towards the Caspian Sea from the Black Sea, armed with artillery and other weapons to back Putin's land forces. Russia's defense ministry announced it was moving more than 10 Navy vessels, including landing boats and artillery warships, to the Black Sea to take part in exercises. But Western nations and Ukraine have voiced alarm over the buildup as a five-strong alliance, or Quint, of the UK, US, Canada, Lithuania, and Poland allies back Ukraine. You see, this narrative is definitely heating up. And though the United States is giving very small bits of it, the public still doesn't really have a clue. Even CNN reported, US considering sending warships to Black Sea amid Russia-Ukraine tensions. The United States is considering sending warships into the Black Sea in the next few weeks in a show of support for Ukraine amid Russia's increased military presence on Ukraine's eastern border, a U.S. defense official told CNN Thursday. The U.S. Navy routinely operates in the Black Sea, but a deployment of warships now would send a specific message to Moscow that the U.S. is closely watching, the official said. The defense official also said that the Navy is continuing to fly reconnaissance aircraft in international airspace over the Black Sea to monitor Russian naval activity and any troops movement in Crimea. On Wednesday, two U.S. B-1 bombers conducted missions over the Aegean Sea. The official told CNN that if something changes, we will be ready to respond. You see, war is rising, and we have two major conflicts with both Russia and China building that seem imminent. Though these conflicts seem to be between other nations, Russia and Ukraine, China and Taiwan, because of the United States foreign policy, the United States always gets involved in these conflicts, which, like all these articles have alluded to, means war. And then next week, Putin is geared to give a speech which is said to declare a new age. So we will have to see what comes from that. On top of all of this, we still have conflict brewing in the Middle East between Iran and Israel, and it's heating up.
Iran is blaming Israel for a sabotage attack on the country's largest nuclear facility and says it will retaliate. Israel has not directly claimed responsibility, but media reports there say an Israeli cyber attack was behind the incident. The Natanz enrichment site suffered a large-scale blackout on Sunday, just hours after uranium enrichment was restarted at the plant. It comes barely a week after the U.S. and Iran held indirect talks in Vienna aimed at reviving the nuclear pact that former U.S. President Donald Trump had abandoned.
I've placed all these articles in the description section of this video. I also will be sending out updates on the news from my website as things develop, so I don't have to consistently repeat this information. If you're not subscribed to my website, truthunedited.com, please make sure that you are so that you can be updated as news develops. Listen, war is brewing all over the world with talks of World War III, while we have major developments and a worldwide transformation of our economic system. All of this is happening while the masses are asleep and paying attention to distractions. Let me also bring up that I know of the talks that they're saying in Israel about the Messiah. And for me, I don't believe any of what I'm hearing, so I'm not giving it much attention. They are just warming everybody up. I am paying attention to these developments because these are factors that will lead to the Great Reset, which is upon us soon, that will affect my life, my family's life, and every one of your lives. When trying to understand what is really happening, I always go back to scripture and see what Yeshua said, because he explained some important things when he was asked what the end of days will look like. Now, as he sat on the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him privately saying, "Tell us, when will these things be? And what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age?" And Yeshua answered and said to them, "Take heed that no one deceives you. For many will come in my name, saying, 'I am the Messiah,' and will deceive many. And you will hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that you are not troubled, for all of these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. For nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there will be famines, pestilences, and earthquakes in various places. All these are the beginning of sorrows." Matthew chapter 24, verses 3 through 8. So understand, we are not at the end, but the beginning of sorrows. We are at the door before the New World Order rises, and we see the rise of their coming false Messiah. They are absolutely priming us and getting us prepared for this, and everyone should be mindful of this and getting their houses in order. If anyone asks or wonders what it is that they should do to prepare for war and economic collapse, please know I've made a couple videos that can assist you with this, so you don't need to feel lost or helpless. Watch the videos and please take the advice. This info was not made to scare you, but to inform you, because they are not giving us the proper level of awareness based on the brewing events that are happening around us. We cannot stop any of these things, but we do not want to be unprepared and then dependent upon the same ones who did not prepare us. If you are a believer, none of this is about fear, but it's about seeing how close we are to the fulfillment of Bible prophecy. This is not about fear. This should deliver urgency to you on just how dangerous the times we are actually in are. We must keep our hearts and minds set on Yahuwah and continue to live a life in service to Him and abide in His will. One day, things will be good, and the next day, things will change forever. And Father has given us His word and prophecy to tell us of what is to come, so that we are never caught off guard and living in the darkness. We are children of the day. But you, brethren, are not in darkness, so that this day should overtake you as a thief. You are all sons of light and sons of the day. We are not of the night nor of darkness. Therefore, let us not sleep as others do, but let us watch and be sober. 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verses 4 through 6. Let's take Yeshua's warning and heed his instruction in Luke chapter 21, verses 34 through 36. But take heed to yourselves, lest your hearts be weighed down with carousing, drunkenness, and cares of this life, and that day come on you unexpectedly. For it will come as a snare on all those who dwell on the face of the whole earth. Watch therefore, and pray always that you may be counted worthy to escape all these things that will come to pass, and to stand before the Son of Man. Luke chapter 21, verses 34 to 36. Do not get so caught up with the world that his day comes upon you unexpectedly. All the signs are here, and they are very clear. Do not live in the darkness, where they cannot see what is upon them until it hits them. This information is very clear that change is upon us, and our Father's day is approaching. Thank him for the mercy he has on all of us to give us the wisdom and discernment to see and be able to properly hear his call for his people. Stay focused and do not get off track, regardless of how the world tries to come at you. Be faithful and true, and rest on our Messiah, for we are truly in the last days. Be blessed. Okay, thanks again for watching. If this has blessed you, please make sure to like it and share it with others. If you haven't done so already, please make sure you subscribe to this channel. Elohim willing, I upload every Friday. Don't forget to follow this ministry on Facebook and Instagram, as well as on my website, truthunedited.com. As always, I would like to give a special thank you to those who have donated to this ministry. Please know your contributions are a huge blessing to this ministry and absolutely help with this assignment. Thank you for your obedience. I'm humbled by your support, and I'm very thankful for you. Be blessed. Okay, thanks again everyone for watching. I love you all.